The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tech Talk on Engaging Commissioning Team Collaborative Methods. My name is Sherry Adams, and I will be the moderator for today's session. Please note that throughout the Tech Talk, all phone lines will be muted. This will minimize any background noise or feedback. When you first join the Tech Talk, an attendee control panel appeared on the right side of your desktop. On the left side of this control panel is a small tab with an arrow icon at the top. Pressing this icon allows you to minimize and maximize the control panel. When maximized, you can use the control panel to submit your questions. We will gather your questions throughout the Tech Talk and we'll leave a little time at the end for Q&A. If your question is related to a particular slide, please include the number of that slide in your presentation. A PDF of these slides from this presentation will be sent electronically to all those who have registered for today's Tech Talk. We will also be recording this and will be available on our website under the resource section. The current password to access the Tech Talks is TechTalks18. Today's presenter is Jim McGee. Jim is CEO of Facility Commissioning Group in Lexington, Kentucky, a third-party independent commissioning services firm founded in 1998 and solely dedicated to developing and implementing practical building systems commissioning processes. Jim earned a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Kentucky in mechanical engineering. He has 17 years of HVAC test and balance experience as an Associated Air Balance Council certified test and balance engineer prior to his 21 years of commissioning and implementation experience. Jim is director and past president of the Southeast chapter of the BCA, and he is member number 20 of the BCA. Jim is a voting member of ASHRAE SSPC 300 commissioning process for buildings and systems with 202, 1.4, and 1.6 subcommittee memberships. He is also certified by USGBC as a lead accredited professional. So Jim, I'm going to turn this over to you now.
Thank you, Sherry. Good day to everybody, and thank you for spending some time with me today. I'm going to talk about a technical subject that's a little different than engineering. It's going to be about collaborative methods, and the beginning of the presentation will be sort of some random slides about process just to bring home the point about collaboration. And then I'll get into some methods, and I will try to show some practical ways that we apply collaboration on our projects. Unsplashed public images are used where I have not used my own photos. Engaging the commissioning team is about a long-term commitment. It's about communication and working with others. Engaging the whole project team, it's not about hiring teams, it's about firing up the commissioning team. So we believe very strongly in implementing a motivated commissioning process by motivating the commissioning team, and we like to use a little bit of collaborative tools in order to bring about some of the momentum that we need, particularly on long projects. To begin with, I assume most people understand the commissioning process, and even if you don't, I'm going to go through a few slides that just sort of, rather than to teach these slides, I'm just trying to bring home the fact that between the tactics and the elements and the different components of the commissioning process, that almost everything we do is interactive and collaborative, whether it's the construction or the commissioning methods itself, whether it's developments of codes and standards, whether it's reporting. The things that we do as commissioning service providers are collaborative by nature. One thing is you will follow a commissioning process. We follow standard 202. Guideline 1.1 has more details, and we utilize these different ones. There are some Canadian references here. But regardless of the process you follow, that process was undoubtedly created through consensus and through collaboration. The process itself is collaborative, and it was created in a collaborative manner. Building construction procurement methods. I think the point of bringing this up is that there are more than one paradigm for managing and the vehicle for creating a project. A lot of us, intrinsically talk about design spec build, and of course we all know that there's design build out there, but there are a lot of different models now for performance contracting, turnkey solutions, management to own, management to lease, and the various things. The point of this being that we have to understand where we're at in the processes that we're involved in, and all of it is interactive and requires communication. These are the elements of the commissioning process sort of put down on a block form, and again, you can see that different activities, different deliverables occur over time, but the thing that they share, whether it's development of design intent, submittal review, creating a warranty review, seasonal testing, these things all require interaction and collaboration between different commissioning team members. And this is true of the various deliverables of the commissioning process. We can sometimes break down, the specific elements of the commissioning process. And in order to do a good commissioning specification, we have to have worked with the design team and an owner to develop the proper elements that go into that particular project. And it's the case with all the deliverables that we have in the process. Similarly, when we do functional performance testing, we typically don't show up and just test things in a vacuum. We form a team and we work together through commissioning procedures in order to get a good functional performance test administered. And this is the truth for all the commissioning deliverables. Systems manuals involve the input of so many different people collaborating to produce documents that you then assemble to produce, the systems manual. All these elements of what we do are collaborative and interactive. This is particularly true for a well-written commissioning specification that clearly rolls out the responsibilities and defines what each party is doing on the contractor side of the equation. And commissioning specifications, need to be very concise and at the same time very, very comprehensive. So again, a team approach through design creates a good specification. And forming a commissioning team itself is obviously a collaborative process. And I think the reason that we really know commissioning is collaborative because commissioning is by definition a team endeavor. We can't, as a commissioning provider, go in and commission without the participation of all the different teams that are taking part in creating the project, whether it's the designers, the consultants, the owner, personnel, mechanical contractors, so forth. We also have teams sometimes from outside of the direct trades where we bring in specialty consultants for laboratories, or we have higher end integrations when we're bringing campus platforms to bear. So the commissioning team is a vastly collaborative process, and a lot of communication is required to pull it off. A lot of times we look at commissioning deliverables in terms of what their content is or when they occur in which phase of the commissioning process. But sometimes it's good to step back and say, who has to collaborate with the commissioning provider in order to deliver good documents? An owner and a design team have to really interact with the commissioning provider in order to develop a good owner's project requirements document. The same can be said for a construction phase commissioning plan and the contractors working together to get the right test scripts down to understand the most efficient way to systematically verify documents. But the interesting point of the slide simply is that none of the tangible deliverables of the commissioning process are delivered simply by the commissioning provider. It's done in collaboration with either contractors, designers, owners, or combinations of those. That extends through functional performance testing. That's true of training, O&M manuals. It's true of the entire commissioning process, that it's an interactive and a collaborative process. So what we'd like to do is, of course, teach the commissioning process to our personnel, but we want people to go out and be able to run jobs, be able to manage meetings, be able to develop long-term relationships on projects that last 1, 2, 3 years long. And what we like to do is equip some of our people with a few of the collaborative techniques and, just general collaboration information. And that's what I want to talk about for the balance, really, of this presentation. Collaborative methods and what we do in terms of creating a commissioning team and creating meeting personnel to go to meetings is that we set up a group. And this is really a group collaborative, so we want to deliberately set up a team before we begin work in order to increase the performance potential from what each individual creates to what you can create as a whole team. And in order to do that, this collaborative group setup, there's really 4 different ways of going about it. Now, if you've ever shown up on a project that you've never been on before and you try to show up and do functional performance tests, you very likely will run into the chance method of a commissioning team, where basically it's collaboration by chance. It's the most basic of the 4 models, but basically this is the commissioning team is just a random pick of who's available. You show up, that's who's there, that's who we're going to do a test with. There's no regards for skills or what the needs of the members of the team are, or even what your own needs are. You just have a chance group. Another way of setting up a commissioning team or a group is to do it through acuity. In other words, you create a commissioning team by balancing skill sets, and you take the different types of thinking, the different types of formulating, conceptualists, formalists, operations technicians, you make a balance of the four acuities, the four types of people that you could get. This really isn't a realistic model for what we do, but you can see where you could get a team with balanced skill sets and end up with a very good team. Another way to do a collaborative group is to set them up based on interest, collaboration by interest, where each of the commissioning team members has similar interests. And they relate those interests to the problem to be solved, and it's a common and unique knowledge, trumps a balanced set of acuity. And this can be a useful, particularly in certain types of mitigation or investigation type processes where you need specific sets of skills. I may sometimes need an industrial hygienist to help me with an indoor air quality or type of problem, and then I could form a very specific team but interest. This is an interesting model, but it's really not what we normally do in commissioning teams. What we normally do in our collaborative methods in commissioning is collaboration by a leader, where members are chosen by a leader, and to some extent they're chosen by their predetermined roles on the project. And as leaders, we just simulate, I need a superintendent and a project manager from each of these disciplines, or a designer of record and a field person from each of these designers. But basically the idea is that the leader wants to set up a team of compatible values, similar schedules, common work environment, and we want to address acuity and interest. We need people who can make the decisions on the project, so the project managers. We also need people who are directing those doing the work on the job, which is usually superintendent. So collaborative methods, collaboration by leader, is how we teach to set up our meetings. In order to get collaboration, there are some basic principles that we need to use in order to work with other people. One of the big things is to look for common ground. And I talk a lot about learning people's names and talking to people and identifying people and then being able to use their names. That's a very common way to start common ground with people, by knowing each other's name. You need to learn about others and listen. Whenever we're in groups, whether it's in a project meeting or in a commissioning meeting, we're going to spend time critiquing things. And I think one of the biggest ways that things get off the rails in meetings or in relationships is when people take it personal, because it's not about the result, it's about the person. So it's one thing to be critical of something that's been done or something that's a result. It's another thing to be critical of people and to be accusatory and so forth. So we want to give and get respect. We want to move deliberately and slowly and be explicit and clear about what we're doing, because what we're really trying to do as facilitators and commissioning providers is form a consensus among the commissioning teams. And we do that by commissioning communication. And we always remember clearly, completely, concisely, concretely, and correctly. Those are the 5 C's to really get good communication across. Another collaborative method Katzenberg and Smith talks about in Team Basics is to use small groups. A lot of times we have a large commissioning group because we have multiple purviews that we're commissioning. Lighting controls, domestic hot water, HVAC controls, building envelope, fire suppression, fire alarm. You can see pretty quickly that there's certain activities that will involve smaller groups than the entire comprehensive commissioning group. So what we want to do is put the appropriate sized groups together and form complementary skill sets for, we might need an electrician, a mechanical contractor, test and balance contractor for a specific purpose. And then we use these common goals to develop a shared work approach and work through mutual accountability. We set up a team, we talk about who's going to do what, when they're going to do it, and then we communicate and we're mutually accountable. We're looking for optimal performance through accountability. That's really what Katzenberg and Smith Team Basics is all about, I think. Another thing that I want to stress on people when we talk about collaborative techniques is to understand how people think. Some people are detail thinkers and they get completely down in the weeds all the time. Some people are visionary and they could care less about the details. Most people fall in between those two, but those are two boundaries to think about when you're talking to a person trying to relate. How do I reach them? Are they a detailed person or are they a visionary? A detailed person might get really, really upset with 500 pages worth of system verification checklists. A visionary person probably won't really even ever consider filling those out. Another thing, and this is really important in some of the meetings and group dynamics we have, is talking about working styles. And again, I'm going to show you two extremes. There's an extreme person who is alone, quiet, focused. They're self-paced. They want to work by themselves. If you set goals for them, they're very conscious of the ownership needs, and they'll meet those goals. And these are people who express themselves very good at writing. They're good at email, texting, and so forth. On the other extreme, we have people who have shared high energy dynamic. These are fast-paced, external thinkers. You know what they're thinking. They're moving around. And these shared high energy dynamic people are best at expressing themselves verbally. They tend to be loud people. They tend to be very conceptual, and they tend to build consensus. And what you need to understand, most people fall in between being alone, quiet, and focused, and being shared high energy and dynamic. But we've all seen things go south, and we've seen it just be a matter of personalities. And sometimes when we get a conflict between these two vastly different types of groups, we can see the loner group becoming very passive aggressive. To 1 minute they're the victim, next minute they're lashing out. On the other hand, we can see sometimes in a group dynamic where the shared high energy person or people try to dominate over the less vocal, less energetic people. And these types of dynamics are what causes a lot of conflict on projects. So just understand, you know, people can be passive aggressive because they're being pushed by something that's alien to their way of thinking and their way of being. I always want to meet people where they are, and one of the best ways that we can do that is understand what are the roots of conflict and how do we get into these type of situations to begin with so that we can then mitigate and maybe even not bring things to a boil to begin with. But one of the big things of avoiding conflicts is managing expectations. And we do this in commissioning meetings by providing proper agendas and coordinating things properly. And I'll get into that a little bit later. And we also want to build consensus. That's why in commissioning, we work as a commissioning team. We try to be transparent, objective, and use open protocols so that people all feel engaged in the process so that there is an effective communication path and that we all follow a very consistent process and we maintain routines and methods. Now, one of the things I really want to stress is this really speaks to the importance of participation in project meetings and particularly appropriately scheduled commissioning meetings, because people want to maintain a routine, they want a consistent flow in the process, and they want effective communication. And we can provide that with good commissioning process through a lot of meetings that are properly scheduled so they're not a waste of people's time and people feel empowered by that. And in that end, you know, how do we get to people? How do we teach people to understand what we're trying to bring about as a process? And what I want to say is that there's three primary types of learning that gets done. Auditory is obviously what I'm doing now. You don't really see me, so this is a very auditory interaction that we're having. Kinesthetics is touching and feeling and manipulating and moving and all that type of stuff, whereas visual learning is reading and looking at things and seeing things. So hearing, seeing, and feeling, you know, are really what we're talking about. Now, this is something that really is interesting to me. Is I'm a person who talks a lot. You know, some people just like to listen to themselves talk. Maybe I'm one of those people. But I have always put way too much emphasis on what words are coming out of my mouth and not nearly enough emphasis on how I'm projecting that. Our body language counts for 52% of what we communicate. And 37% of what we communicate has to do with the tone of our voice. A whopping 89% of what we communicate to others, either indirectly or directly, is nonverbal. It's not about words. Now, I've always thought that my words are the direct form of communication. And they may be now while we're talking and it's the only mode. But if you're seeing me and now that you're hearing me, you can tell that tone will communicate more than actual content. And that is an amazing thing to know and a very empowering thing to know, too. The other thing about communicating with people is listening skills. And there's just no replacement for being able to listen to people and take into account their perspectives on what they're trying to say. And we can learn listening skills. One of the things in our office that we deplore is headphones and people, being distracted by music or other things while they're working, because we want our office spaces to be interactive, that people understand when delivery people are coming through the office or whatever it might be. So we need to be open to hearing others, and we need to respect other people who are speaking. We need to focus on them when they do, and we need to help encourage that communication by recognizing body language signals, nodding our heads, smiling, appropriately verbally enhancing what they're saying so that people know you're listening to them. When people think that you hear them, they make a lot of difference on what they're willing to hear from you as well. So it's like one of those, country sayings where, we don't really care about what you're going to do for us until we understand how you're going to be with us, how you're going to be on our side and work with us. So what are some barriers to collaboration? Not surprisingly, the number one most difficult barrier to achieving agreement is diverse opinions or different views. And one of the things we have to understand is that we can't always make everybody agree with everything. And then sometimes the outcome of the meeting is that groups of people agree to disagree. And that is an outcome that we can have. We cannot, at a certain point, invest energy into trying to change minds when we all have set positions. But we can still work together and we can still collaborate. Organizational rankings is a barrier to collaboration. If your boss is in the room, you might be far less likely to criticize or even to bring up a point for fear of failure. Stranger danger is a phenomenon where somebody in the room, particularly if they're somebody who seems powerful or has some type of an authority, it can shut a whole room down because they're just not familiar with the person. Needle in the haystack is an interesting type of barrier. It's a sort of an institutional thing where the group recognizes that this problem has been solved before, but since it's been solved before, we should just go back and be able to find that solution. And they just spend countless time trying to find a solution rather than a little bit of time going ahead and just solving the problem again. So needle in a haystack is sort of a diversionary way. The opposite of that is kind of hoarding, when a certain group of people want to have total control of the whole thing, and that can be it'll be a barrier to collaboration because you're not accepting input and communicating and so forth. And then another thing is just the change is hard phenomenon that represents people, and the fact that we haven't done that before, and therefore we're not going to do it now. It's not invented here, so we don't do that here. And those are just common human nature type barriers. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek sort of a take. But one of the things that we like to do when we teach the collaborative methods is to come up with some personality traits and see, how these people fit. Is this horse trader person a deep thinker, a big picture guy, or a detailed guy, and so forth and so on. So you can always look, everybody knows the horse traders on their jobs, or people who make up stories, or the big cult of personality person who just rules the whole job, But I think what's a really interesting exercise is to look back at these collaborative concepts and try to fit these people into where these types of caricatures can actually be defined by the characteristics that we talked about collaboratively. Moving into a few details in the last 10 minutes or so here, I want to talk about the commissioning team and how we project it and talk about it. This is a typical wheel and spoke, diagram of a commissioning team where the commissioning authorities nestled in the middle with the owner, and all the design and vendor and contracting things occur around them. This is a very static model. When you look at this, it's just like nothing's happening. There's no activity. And this really isn't what we do when we go on a commissioning team, because yes, we identify the team, but say we put a commissioning plan out and when we start working for people, a lot of times what we have is the commissioning failure model, where we get engaged on a project, we produce a commissioning plan or other types of documentation, whether it be meeting minutes or tracking forms, and we distribute that and we wait for people to send it back to us. And this is really a surefire failure, because this isn't collaborating in the sense this is more dictatorially sending stuff out. What we really try to teach in commissioning success is that you, as the facilitator, need to initiate the communication and then sustain that communication. So we want to produce a commissioning plan, and then we want to communicate with all the different members of the commissioning team to make sure they understand their roles, their responsibilities. We don't just put out lists and then forget about them and wait 3 months for somebody to notify us to come back to a project. We want to follow up within reason, and it's very important. Just the direction that we point these arrows really conveys a lot about how we value the other team members, how we take our facilitation skills seriously, and how we proactively bring about, successful collaboration through communication and accountability. So all of this is to say that in terms of the commissioning team, stakeholders must collaborate. I think we realize that, so we need to use tools that teach people how to do collaboration. And that's kind of the tech talk that I'm talking today. I like this image because it shows you sort of an indoor built environment and an exterior built environment, and they're separated by a barrier. But what's interesting to me is when we design and build these types of facilities, we are, in definition, developing places for people to collaborate, whether it's a research facility, an automotive manufacturing plant, a football stadium. Whatever we're doing is a collaborative space. So I want to always look at that the ends might be justified if we use the same means. So in order to build collaborative spaces, we must collaborate. And the best way that we do that as commissioning providers is through the commissioning plan. And I have a few little things that we do that just touches the surface of how we sort of employ some of these collaborative techniques. But documentation consistency and approach consistency is crucial to getting team members on board and participating. We need to make our meetings and our documentation as user-friendly as possible. We need to minimize redundancy, not expect people to go beyond what would be normal documenting, and we need to leverage startup and checkout that vendors are doing with the types of things that we want to do within our third-party commissioning models. So the best way to really bring all this about, what is the commissioning plan seeking to do? The commissioning plan seeks to collaborate. So we want to report in ways that don't offend. We've talked about this before, that we just state the facts, and we always and only state the facts. We do not direct actions, and we avoid definitive statements. So by not assigning responsibility unilaterally, we're not blaming people for things. So it's not on us to solve the problem without a consensus of the project team and the commissioning team. So we really just are putting out information to seek input from all the stakeholders so that it can be communicated openly and transparently. And then we can use certain references, whether it's the construction drawings or the project specifications, to talk about the facts and what should or shouldn't be. And we're not making it personal, and we're not assigning definitive responsibility or blame for things. That's really for another dynamic, not the commissioning to do. Ours is to report what we see honestly and fairly. Which brings me to commissioning meetings. And particularly when you do repeated meetings on projects over a period of time, a year, even sometimes longer, interpersonal relationships are important, and we should not blow them off. We should learn to understand who each of the people in our meetings are, and we need to learn and use their names early on. You get respect, you get participation, you know how to address people and call them, and by knowing names, we can collaborate and coordinate more efficiently. And we want to do this early and often in meetings. And we want to coincide our meetings, too, in a way that doesn't put people out any more than necessary. If we can plan a commissioning meeting in conjunction with a normal owner, architect, contractor meeting or a normal contractor coordination meeting, then that's the way to do it. And I like to bring commissioning people into significant projects at the right time, which to me, if we can be in the pre-bid, pre-construction, pre-installation meetings, and then select coordination meetings, that really sets the tone that not only are we interested in what's going on, but we value the work that's going on the construction side enough to be a part of it, or at least to pay attention to it. The way we set up our roll call on our meetings can make a difference. Like we teach a checklist format of setting up a attendance sheet where we have people sign in originally and then we type it out and just leave a check mark. So if you're going to 25 meetings, ostensibly you've only had to fill your name out one time and your information. The rest of the time it's just a check mark. To us it shows that it's respect for them. We've taken into account the fact that they filled out our attendance sheet, And now we recognize who they are. We can just check their name off and just hand the sheet to new people, or if there's a spelling or correction, we can pick that up. And each time that we do meeting minutes, we update the attendance sheet. So in the subsequent meeting, people who are new are included. They're now seeing their name and they're checking their name. One thing that aggravates me a lot of times is I'll go to a project meeting for 35 months, and or 15 months, let's say, and I've never seen my name end up on their attendance list. And I think it's very valuable that if people take the time to come to your meeting, that we recognize who they are and give them that recognition. Another thing we do is we always put attendees on the meetings minutes so that people recognize that they participated. If it's your job to go to these meetings, it's to your advantage to get your name on the minutes so that your boss sees you there. You can motivate people by coming to your meetings if you do good attendance sheets and then you put out good meeting minutes and early and often so that people get them. Another thing that helps is when we do meeting minutes, it's very difficult sometimes to sort through all the verbiage and figure out what needs to be done. So we always try to clearly identify what the action items are so that we can possibly take those action items, and put them into a place where we can collect them like a resolution tracking form. But if you're reading the minutes, you can look down through the action items and you can see that we've assigned the person responsible based on the consensus in that meeting, and we put dates of when they're going to do things. And that way we can be accountable, we can follow up on the minutes, and people all have a good understanding of their roles and their accountability. Similar with pre-commissioning checklists, system verification checklists, we want to interface with the contractors, but we don't want to make them create the Greater Los Angeles phone book. We want to assist and we want to be collaborative in delivering the commissioning process. And the way we do it is by making reports and paperwork easier to fill out. This is a bunch of zone dampers. For one unit it had 10 zone dampers. So rather than having 10 system verification checklists, we figure out a way to put the whole system on one form so it can be neatly checked out and it's valuable, people can see the whole thing. Sometimes the systems are too big to put on one form and we have to put on multiple tables, but in order to concisely save people's time and energy, rather than creating a phone book, we'll put out a master sheet of what the normal, checks are, and then we'll have a table that lists out all the rooms. So now instead of having, 200 pages, I can consolidate into, 15 pages. So this really reduces what is the apparent burden of paperwork by taking into account, people's needs for conciseness and to make things efficient, basically. Another thing is to leverage equipment lists, whether we're using a test and balance report or whatever sources we have, operation and maintenance manuals, startup reports, and so forth. And at the end of the day, we want to turn over an equipment list, and we don't want to make people write the same serial numbers and model numbers over and over again. So if you know it's on test and balance reports, then take it from there, and don't make a contractor fill out the information that's already somewhere else. That's our view. I'll close on the digital tools and digital techniques. We're in an age where, we're bringing our iPads and we're annotating our drawings and we're sending, redacted, messages back and forth from our office to communicate. We're working on different types of construction software, owner-driven, contractor-driven, and so forth. All the different software, the whole convergence of technology where we have cameras and voice memos and GPS and sound level readings all available on our cell phones. These are all fantastic tools, but these are tools that are made and work better in collaboration. And when we have solutions that are technical solutions within our office or in the field, we very much want to share those because it's very easy to get lost in the technology of what we're doing and forget about the fact that we're really building relationships and working with people. So we're wanting to communicate positively and directly with people on projects and not just not poo-pooing technology because it's a great thing, whether we're using Bluebeam or what we're doing. Excuse me, it's just a matter that we don't get lost in the technology and forget about the people that we're trying to serve. So that's really it. Commissioning is a collaborative process. We manage teams of people, and collaborative methods can help us to do that. It can help us to recognize pitfalls. It can help us to avoid conflict. Since commissioning providers don't hold the contracts, Collaboration is a way to enhance our ability to manage and run the commissioning team. And sound collaborative method brings about teamwork and a commissioning project that achieves results. So commissioning providers can be facilitators, and you can be respected in your currency if your currency is honesty, truth, kindness, helpful, facilitating. Those are things that you can trade in as a commissioning provider. And communication is really the gateway to collaboration. So with that said, these are some of the photos that I used. You can find Unsplash, where you can get open source photos for your presentations as well. And that's really what I have today, Sherry, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jim. We really appreciate your time and expertise. It doesn't look like we have any questions. We might just give it a moment just in case if anybody has any questions they can ask us right now. As a reminder, just a side note, if you haven't already renewed your membership, now is the time so that you continue to get these Tech Talks and other valuable benefits. So give it a moment here and see. Well, I don't think we've had anything, Jim. I think it was very thorough. We really appreciate, again, your time and expertise today.
Thank you, Sherry. I enjoyed it. You have a great afternoon.
You too. And on behalf of the BCA, I'd like to thank everyone for participating today and have a great day.